We will now continue with the PocketScope device. So let's shift our attention for a moment to the Connections window. Drag your scope to the left of the screen, and before you open the Connections window, I'd like you to pause this video and see if you can think if our Transformer PocketScope is going to appear in the input or output list of the Connections window. When you have the answer, press play to continue. Okay, to see if you were correct, let's open the Connections window. Hopefully you said that the PocketScope is going to be in the input list. Something peculiar is going on though. We don't see the scope in any of these lists. Let me explain. The reason for this is that we need to add a graph line into the scope. Let me show you how easy it is to do this. Close the Connections window, and then we will click on this Add button. Okay, we need to give our graph line a name. To make things clear, I'm going to call mine Yellow. This drop-down list is used to choose the color of your graph line. So I'll make my color yellow and click on Create. You will notice in the PocketScope a yellow line was created. One of the very useful features of PocketScope is that you can load virtually unlimited scope lines. So while we're here, let's create a second line, call it green, then select the green color, and click on Create. Now that we have our two graph lines, we can click on Close. Okay, we've now created two graph lines, and you can see them here in this graph list. This icon will show or hide the graph line, and this one will delete a line. So be careful with that one. You don't need to disconnect a graph line before deleting it. PocketSim will automatically do that for you and reroute devices as needed in the Connections window. Let's go back to the Connections window, and now things have certainly changed. We can now see both the lines we created in the input list. This is very important to understand, that each line is now seen as its own entity or device. I'm now going to make a few connections, and if you don't understand them, don't stress. It's just so that we have some data going into the graph lines. Let's start by connecting the transformer output with the yellow input line by clicking the transformer output, then the yellow line input. You can now close the Connections window. To see what we just did, the scope needs to run. So let's click on this Run button. You should now see a sine wave like this one coming from the transformer. You can play around with these transformer output parameters, and you should see the results on the yellow line. You can also hide the green line by clicking on its hide icon. Just be careful not to delete it. Okay, let's quickly do something with the green line so that we can have two different wave patterns. Open the Connections window, and this time I'm going to connect the transformer output to the diode bridge input. By the way, this is a new feature in PocketSim, where you can send one output to multiple inputs. Anyway, we now have a signal present in the diode bridge, so let's connect the diode bridge output to the green input and close the Connections window. If you want to observe the green input only, we can hide the yellow line and show the green one. And again, adjust the parameters of the transformer to see the effect on the graph. Lastly, I want to show you the Delete button. Let's quickly open the Connections window, and I want you to make a mental note of this yellow line input and the transformer which is connected to it. I'll now close the Connections window and click on the Delete button for the yellow line right here. The yellow line is gone, and if we open the Connections window, you can see that the yellow input is not present anymore, and the routing has been taken care of for us. Before I finish, let me quickly show you the Reset button. Let's click on the Run button to stop the PocketSim. Now, let's disconnect this graph line, open Connections, and we will click this red cross to disconnect. Going back to the PocketScope, you'll notice that the graph line will stay in its last state, so if you want to reset the line, just click Reset. Simple as that. Like always, I want to encourage you to play around on your own. That's the beauty of PocketSim. You can't break any expensive equipment if you do something wrong. If things get confusing, just delete a device and start over. It's all part of the learning process. Okay guys, this was Midge. Thanks again for watching, and see you in the next lesson.